Welcome to the Business Talk, a global podcast series that highlights distinguished faculty members and their impactful scholarly contributions. I am Deepak, your host from India. Today we are honored to welcome Dr. Chanaka Jayawardhena as our distinguished guest on Business Talk today. Before we get started, I would like to introduce today's guest. Dr. Chanaka Jayawardhena is a professor of marketing at Surrey Business School and head of the strategy, marketing and international business discipline, where he leads research and teaching at the intersection of services, digital technologies, and consumer behavior. Before joining the University of Surrey, he held academic positions at the University of Hull, Loughborough University, De Montfort University, and the University of Moratuwa in Sri Lanka, giving his work a distinct international perspective on markets and organizations. A former Cambridge Commonwealth scholar, he draws on rigorous training spanning a PhD from De Montfort University, a MPhil from the University of Cambridge, and a BSc from the University of Moratuwa. His research explores how organizations deploy technologies such as internet and mobile platforms to design better service experiences, build long-term customer relationships, and support moral, ethical, sustainable forms of consumption. This agenda has translated into impactful collaborations with public and private sector organizations, as well as advisory work for government bodies, where he helps decision makers understand changing consumer expectations in an increasingly digital marketplace. Professor Jayawardena is also an experienced doctoral supervisor and research mentor, having guided more than 20 plus PhD students to completion and examine numerous theses in UK and abroad. He teaches across undergraduate, postgraduate, and MBA programs with modules that blend contemporary marketing theory, analytics, and practice, and is committed to creating inclusive discussion-rich classroom that equips students to address real managerial problems. In today's episode, Dr. Chanaka Jayawardhena joins us to explore the key insights from his research, dynamic evolution, and transformative trends in the consumer market, a technology paradox perspective. Let's not keep you waiting. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chanaka Jayawardhena to the conversation. Professor Jayawardhena, it's a distinct privilege to welcome you to Business Talk. We are grateful to you for accepting our invitation.
Deepak, thank you very much for having me. Before we sort of dive in, I just want to acknowledge something very small. The word paradox can sound like academic jargon, but I think every listener has felt it. So the moment your phone makes your life easier, but at the same time, you feel that you're being watched. So that's not actually a bug in the system. That is the system. And once we see that, everything about the modern consumer behavior starts to make sense. And that's what we mean by paradox.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, your paper argues that the 21st century consumer market is fundamentally about the psychological management of paradox, not simple trade-offs. If you had to explain this technology paradox really to a CEO in 2 minutes, how would you frame it so they truly feel the urgency?
So, Deepak, if I had 2 minutes with a CEO, I'll say the following. I'll say that CEOs think that consumers face trade-offs. They don't. They actually face paradoxes. So what do I mean by that? A trade-off is, do I want the convenience or the privacy? Essentially pick one. But a paradox is I want the convenience and the privacy at the same time. And I get annoyed if you're making me choose. So the urgency is that you need to design for trade-offs. You build products that solve one problem, but create another. So when consumers feel that tension, they don't leave immediately, they stay. But what they're actually doing is they're actually coping. So the way they cope is that they use the product. They might actually complain about the product. They begin to distrust your product, but they don't actually delete it. That silent resentment is pretty toxic. It actually erodes the brand trust very slowly and then suddenly. So companies that win the next decade aren't the ones that with the best AI. They are the ones who openly say that, we know that you feel uncomfortable, and here's what we are doing about it. That transparency becomes your competitive moat, and so that's the urgency, not the fear of disruption, but the sort of fear of invisible erosion.
Professor, you identify 8 transformative trends from AI friendship apps and self-tracking variables to the metaverse and sustainability concerns, all reinterpreted through paradoxes like empowerment versus alienation and innovation versus sustainability. Which of these paradoxes do you think is most misunderstood by managers today and why?
Deepak, that's a hard one. But I think out of all those 8 paradoxes that we've identified, I think the authenticity versus manipulation is perhaps the most misunderstood. So, managers look at influencer marketing, for example, and then think, great, we'll pay someone popular to say nice things about us. And they essentially see this as the media buy. But consumers see this as a relationship test. So what managers actually miss is that consumers don't evaluate a single post. They actually evaluate a pattern. So they see one sponsored video from a trusted creator. That's good. Then they see the same creator start creating crypto, and then skincare, and then vitamins, all in the space of 1 or 2 weeks. So the consumer's brain essentially flips a switch. What sort of felt like a friend now feels like a salesperson because they are promoting everything under the sun. And that anger isn't sort of only directed at the creator. It's actually at the brand that turned them. So the paradox we have is that the authenticity, which is the most valuable currency in marketing, is somehow lost. And you pretty much destroyed it. And the most misunderstood because managers treat it as a tactical channel problem. So it's actually a relationship integrity problem, not a tactical problem.
Professor, the technology paradox framework integrates antecedents, core tensions, coping strategies, outcomes, and moderators into a single process model. Can you walk us through a concrete example, for instance, the personalization privacy paradox, from the initial technological and psychocultural forces all the way to consumer outcomes?
Okay, let me try this. So let's imagine, we have a streaming service. Let's call it Streamfreaks. So what are the antecedents? So antecedents are the stuff that enable Streamfreaks to deliver the service to you. So they have an algorithm that sort of looks at your viewing history and recommends shows. And so the force that you have, what you want is that you want to discover stuff without too much of an effort. So you are sort of tired of scrolling. So they have the technological fix to enable you to sort of not waste any energy. And the core tension that you have is that you like the personalization, which means you are saving time. It feels fantastic. They make recommendations for you, but you also want privacy. So in other words, we want control. So this conflict, because it's the same data that enables both of these things. So how do we cope? So on one hand, we could say that it's worth it. We share everything. And in the paper, we call that these approach behaviors. Another coping strategy might be you perhaps watch only in guest mode, or you immediately delete all the history once you've watched. So that's sort of avoidance. Ambivalence, so is sort of, which sits in between. You accept the terms without actually reading them. You don't care. And then you feel vaguely uneasy when a recommendation is too accurate. So the outcomes are that, our well-being goes up because, there is the joy of discovery. Or it might be that, we don't feel great because we feel rather creepy that somebody is really watching you and then really understanding us too well. So the behaviors are one of two folds. If we feel really nice, we are very happy with everything, then our loyalty increases. So in other words, we keep on coming back. Or it's passive resistance. And so what are the moderators? So moderators might be the different segments of consumers. So, for example, Gen Z might ambivalently accept. An older user might avoid. And then, if it is a trusted brand, you will forgive more. So this framework shows that this isn't at random. It's very much a process. So there are the antecedents, there are the core tensions that arise, and then the coping strategies that we as consumers sort of, display. So once you see this process, marketeers can actually design for it.
Professor, you distinguish three broad coping strategies: approach, avoidance, and ambivalence. With ambivalence being especially visible in the privacy paradox. What worries you most about this long-term muddling through state in consumers? And what might it do to trust in digital markets over the next decade?
So I think what worries me most is the ambivalence, because I think this can lead to rather chronic cynicism. So right now, many consumers, I think, live in a state of I know they are tracking me, I don't like it, but what can I do? That's essentially ambivalence. I think this is rather exhausting for us to maintain. So over a decade or so, I essentially worry about three things. One is the generalized distrust. So what I mean by that is that not the distrust of one actor, but the distrust of the entire digital economy. So we feel that we are being manipulated. They feel that we are being discriminated. And what happens is that this hurts the ethical brands the most. Second is the resignation. So in other words, the passive resignation. So when people believe that they have no agency, meaning we don't really control what happens out there. So we simply stop trying. We give up. So we don't adjust our privacy settings. We don't read terms and conditions. We just accept. And that's not really empowerment. That's like being very helpless. And the third aspect is the hidden well-being costs. In our paper, we cite what's referred to as the digital vulnerability. So what we mean by this is a sort of a low-level persistent anxiety about how our data might be used in the future. We don't actually have good longitudinal data about this. So, but my suspicion is that over a period of time, this cumulative stress is pretty corrosive. It's pretty bad. It's literally like a death by 1,000 cuts. So if you ask me what worries me most is that we are pretty much normalizing a relationship with technology that feels slightly bad all the time. And then we call it just the way things are.
Professor, generational cohort, culture, brand trust, and regulation all appear as a powerful moderators shaping how consumers experience and navigate these paradoxes. If we zoom in on Gen Z and emerging Gen Alpha, how is their paradox calculus differ from older generations when it comes to AI, data sharing, and digital identity?
This is quite fascinating because Gen Z and Alpha aren't digital natives in the naive sense. They are natives who are very skeptical. The older generations, the millennials and older, the privacy paradox is very much alive. So the way how they view things is that I value privacy, but I give up data for convenience. For Gen Z, I think it's different. They think that I know you have my data. I assume that. My question is, are you using it for me or on me? So the calculus is actually shifting from control to fairness, as I see it. So, they'll say, okay, I'll share the location if the value exchange feels transparent. I'll share the location, I'll get a coupon, that's good for me. But they reject a brand that's sort of extractive. Not because they are ideologically pure, but because they've grown up seeing how the game is actually being played, because they've literally grown up with it. So with regard to digital identity, I think they are far more fluid. An older consumer might see one real self, whereas a Gen Z sees multiple selves. So there's the work self, there's the friend self, and then there's the sort of the fandom self. And they expect platform to respect these boundaries and also understand the differences between these aspects. So the moderator that matters most for them isn't the age. It's the perceived brand respect for their agency, So if you violate that, that perceived respect for their agency, they don't complain, they'll just ghost you.
Professor, you argue that many of today's trends are actually manifestation of deeper psychocultural forces, such as the need for identity expression, community, and well-being. How can brands avoid chasing surface-level trends like staycations or sober curious and instead design around the underlying psychological needs?
Yeah, Deepak, so this is where I think managers often get trapped by their own dashboards. If you say, let's take staycations, for example. So they might see that staycations are up by, I don't know, let's say 40%. And then they think, great, okay, let's launch a staycation package. I think what they're actually doing is they are literally chasing the symptom. The underlying force is escape from digital overload and reclaiming a sense of control. So staycation is how consumers actually express that. The method I recommend for brands is pretty simple. When you see a trend, ask why now. So let's take staycations, for example. So staycations are up, why now? So it might be because international travel is really stressful with the war going on and so on and so forth. So why is that stressful? Because planning feels overwhelming. Where do we go? Is it safe? And so on and so forth. Why is it overwhelming? Because we suffer from the decisions fatigue across every domain. So now you're not actually selling a staycation. You're selling relief from all these decisions that consumers have to make. So that's a deeper need. It lasts longer, and that's a paradox resilience. So brands need to really, really dig deep and understand why these trends come about. So they shouldn't be trend spotters, but truly understand why the trend is there. And then if they design products and services that cater to these needs, then I think they're onto a winner.
Professor, in the paper, you propose 3 managerial levers: ethical AI and transparent data practices, authentic inclusivity, and sustainable innovation. If a CMO had to start with one of these tomorrow morning, where would you advise them to begin, and what would be the first 90 days look like in practice?
So let's take the first one. So I'll tell the CMO, let's start with ethical AI and transparent data practices. Not because it's the most exciting, but I think it is the foundation as we've discussed. Because I think without data trust, inclusivity campaigns look like pretty much like manipulation. And it's also the case that without data trust, sustainability looks like pretty much like greenwashing. So trust is the platform that everything literally sits on. So in the first 90 days, I would like to think of it as sort of 3 components. First 30 days, I think what we need to sort of really find out where we are. So in other words, carry out an audit. Map every place that you collect consumer data. Then ask yourself the question, if we showed consumers exactly what we are doing, what we are collecting, would they feel respected or violated? If they feel, if you feel that they are being violated, stop. Redesign it such a way that they do not, feel violated. So once you've done the audit, I think then what you need to do is to essentially demonstrate to consumers that that privacy can be consumed like a snack. So ideally, explain your privacy controls in a one-screen plain language control panel, where a potential user can see and change what data they would like to be used for personalization. So make it really boring, literally delightfully boring, and that's the point. But I think what most organizations have is pages and pages of privacy policies. I think that's really bad. And then the third element, or the third segment of days, from let's say day 60 to day 90, is to test this transparency that you brought about. So the best way to do is run an A/B test. Let's say the group A gets the standard personalized experience, and group B gets the same personalization but with a clear explanation. So for example, we recommend this to you because you watched X or Y. You can turn off, and if you don't like it, you can turn this off now. So you measure trust, not just the clicks. I suspect most CMOs will be scared of running group B, because I think that's what really will allow them to see what's going on. But I think that's exactly why they should start here.
Professor, the framework calls for moving beyond static cross-sectional studies toward longitudinal and multi-method approaches such as ESM, neurography, and digital phenotyping. What kinds of new insights about consumer well-being and coping do you think these methods could reveal that traditional surveys simply cannot capture?
So I think traditional surveys simply ask, how do you feel about data privacy? And if somebody asks me that question, I will think of a very rational answer. And as we've been arguing throughout this entire paper, the paradox is often not non-conscious. We want the best of both worlds, as it were. So I think we need to sort of think about new ways of data collecting, and you sort of highlighted three methods. So very briefly, what ESM is essentially what we refer to as experience sampling methodology. So here, what we do is that we very randomly might try to tap into the experience of consumers. So we might immediately ping a question during the day, and then ask, right now, how much in control do you feel? You might feel that that discovery, that privacy sort of anxiety peaks at about 10 p.m. And when you're really tired and scrolling, not when you're filling out a survey at 2 p.m. So really try to get the responses when consumers are in flow, when they are really working. Neurography, on the other hand, is essentially sort of a combination of EEG and interviews. So EEGs are these sensors that get plugged onto your head, essentially. And then what they actually could show is how consumers actually feel when a recommendation is really, really accurate. So your brain actually shows simultaneous activation of reward and threat circuits. So you literally feel the pleasure and unease at in the literal millisecond, and then EEG can actually capture it, and then you carry out the interviews afterwards to really inquire about how they really felt. And I think no real survey can capture that level of richness. And the last, the third method is what we refer to as digital phenotyping. Obviously, this is with consent. So here, what we do is that we track how consumers cope in their behaviors. So which settings people actually change, which apps do they abandon after a privacy scare? Because we think actions really speak louder than words. than like it scales. So what do you think we will learn? I think we will learn that consumers are far more sophisticated and at the same time are far more vulnerable than the surveys suggest. And that well-being isn't an average. It's actually a pattern over time, because typical surveys try to get a snapshot of a cross section, and we don't think that's really the way forward.
Professor, you emphasize that technology is a double-edged sword that simultaneously enhances and threatens autonomy, identity, and social connection. Looking ahead, what would a healthy technology ecosystem look like from a consumer psychology perspective? And how would we know we are moving in that direction?
So I think a healthy ecosystem from the consumer side, so in our side, I think we'll have three sort of foundations. First, I think there'll be friction, but then that friction will have some purpose. So what we mean by that is that we explicitly recognize that not all friction is bad. So a privacy control that takes 3 seconds to find, that's not great. But then if it is a 1 second toggle that says surprise me versus show me what I already like, that's good friction. So healthy systems don't hide tension. They invite you into it. So in my earlier I said in the sort of the second half of those 90 days, our imaginary 90 days, I said devise ways where the people could actually simplify things. So this is that simplification that I'm referring to. The second foundation is right now, systems know everything about you, but almost nothing about the system. So I think a healthy ecosystem can reverse this partially. You should be able to ask, why did I see that ad? So for example, Google, or rather, YouTube throws us ads. We should be able to ask, why did I actually see that ad? And get a meaningful answer, not some sort of a legal disclaimer, a proper explanation. So try and repair the asymmetry that exists right now. And the third aspect is that we should have permission to disconnect without any penalty whatsoever. So if disconnecting means losing your playlist, your social graph, your saved history, that's pretty much a lock-in, because we have the fear, if we disconnect, we are going to lose all this. So this is not an earned loyalty. It's literally putting a gun to your head to say that if you disconnect, we are going to lose all these things. So we think that healthy ecosystems will let you live cleanly. And I think paradoxically, if that were be the case, then it'll help us build trust, and that will actually make us want to stay. So how would we know that we are moving in this direction? I think what we would see is that we would see consumer confidence metrics rise, not just the engagement stuff. We'd hear people say, not just, I love this app, but I also trust this company.
Professor, I'd like to conclude this episode with one last question. Finally, your model ends with a strong call to design for paradox management, not to eliminate tensions, but to help consumers live with them more constructively. Can you share one or two design principles or examples, perhaps in AI interfaces, privacy controls, or sustainability dashboards that you believe embody this philosophy well?
So let me give you two examples, one from privacy and one from sustainability. Let's take privacy first. So imagine there's a fitness app. Instead of asking for all the data forever, what if it simply says, I'd like to access your location for the next 7 days, and so that I can learn your running routes. After that, I'll pause. You can renew, extend, or stop. I think that's a privacy nap. A temporary, reversible, and respectful. It doesn't eliminate the personalization, So the tension is there. It manages it, giving the consumers recurring agency. We feel that there's agency, we can stop it after 7 days. Let's take a sustainability example. These days, lots of apps allow you to calculate the amount of carbon emitted if you fly, for example. So a travel booking site shows flight options with emissions data. But instead of guilt, as it is the case these days, this is really bad, you're going to emit 800 kilograms of CO2 by flying from A to B. What if it offers context and action? So what if it says this flight is higher than average? You could offset it for $4, £4, or explore trains for this route. So I think it makes the innovation sustainability paradox visible without introducing avoidance through some sort of shaming. So I think the design principle is that don't resolve the paradox for the consumer. Give them the tools to resolve it with you. I think that's the difference between manipulation and respect.
Thank you, Professor Jayawardhena, for taking us inside the paradoxical heart of today's technology-driven consumer world. Your insights on how consumers balance empowerment and anxiety, personalization and privacy, and progress and sustainability offer a powerful roadmap for our both scholars and practitioners. As we move forward, your technology paradox framework challenges us not to escape these tensions, but to manage them wisely, ethically, and with a deeper respect for consumer well-being. Thank you once again for sharing your time and research publication with us today. This has been a truly enlightening. Thank you so much.
Deepak, thank you very much. If I would like listeners to take one thing away, I hope it's this. So the goal isn't to build a world without technological paradoxes. Such a world doesn't really exist. So the goal is to build relationships with consumers that are really honest about the tensions, and also be humble about what technology can do, the limits of technology, and committed to well-being, and not just the engagement. I think that's that's the hard work. That's also the only way that we can move forward.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.